carrier, because a second carrier won't want to go really low on a short tower. So that means you have to have multiple towers for carrier A, then you have to have multiple towers for carrier B, and pretty soon you have towers mushrooming up along the whole neighborhood, and that's really not where we want to go, especially since early in the process, county staff advises that it's desirable to have co-locatable towers, and we tried to take that in mind. And finally, AT&T had an experience that we investigated in the Scottsdale area where they put up multiple stealth towers in the area. And all of those problems that I just mentioned came to bear. They had multiple cable cuts, they had outages that were difficult to take care of. They had to use a lot of electricity because they had to run power out to all these different locations. And in fact, the person who led that effort for AT&T was terminated from his responsibility. Then Verizon came in, and guess what? They put up one tower, covered the whole area. They had very few breakdowns, and so it all turned out pretty well. So we discarded the idea of multiple towers, and I just want to make sure that everybody's aware that we didn't just throw it away initially. We actually really did look into it, and we just ran into too many technical and logistical issues that it didn't make sense for us. So what we ended up doing was selling on a location that's right next to the Las Campanas Owners Association Administration Building and Maintenance Facility. Why? There's already power there. There's already fiber optic cable there. There's a parking lot, so we don't have to tear up any more land. And there's also security system there. And the nice thing about it was, and I'll explain this in a moment, it was a great place to have one location that gives great 100% coverage to the neighborhood. So how do you decide on the height of a tower? And this is how it's done these days. The various cellular companies send out an engineering team to the physical location, and they have drones. And the drones go up to certain levels, and they do visual imaging. And they wouldn't tell me which frequencies or which spectrum that they use. Part of it, I'm sure, is visible, but they probably have other ones because it's very proprietary and to their companies, and they want to protect that. But in any case, they go to different levels. They do imaging. They take that, and it takes the imaging of the topology, and it's unique to every place that you put a cell tower. And so they take that data back, and they've developed these very sophisticated and proprietary software systems where they plug that data into the software system and they develop coverage maps. So they can take a look at a certain height and say, this is only going to be 50% coverage. This will be 100% coverage. If you go higher than that, it's still 100% coverage, so there's no reason to go higher. So the height that they settled in on was 70 feet. And the rule of thumb in that particular area is for every 10 feet that you reduce that 70 feet, you lose about 25% of your coverage. So going from a 70-foot tower down to a 48-foot tower, if you do the math, that's losing about 55% of your coverage from that particular tower. So that's a very important consideration. So if you don't mind, Amy, could you share your screen that shows the physical location that we're proposing for the tower? Because I'd like to point this out to staff as well as to the commissioners. Okay, can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if Ms. Tessa Jo can pull her little screen down or not, but I'll just, let's see, how do I do this? If you look at the bottom left, you can see that the letters DD, that's where the BDD is, the water treatment plant. There you go, right there. And that is about 450 yards from the tower where it says tower. And if you look, the road that comes in from the south is Cajal del Rio. And there's Las Campanas Drive that winds all the way around. There's the HOA building, which is immediately adjacent to the tower. To the west is the Camino Real Trail. That's a beautiful trail that the federal government, along with the county, put in. I hike that trail all the time. I can tell you with personal experience, the coverage there is really bad. If you twist an ankle and you can't walk, you're in deep trouble because you're not going to be able to use your cell phone to call for help. There's a line of power. Actually, there are 3 lines of power lines that go north and south. Those poles are anywhere from 50 to over 102 feet. I've gone out and measured a number of them myself. And so those are behind the tower, not that far behind the tower. And it's unfortunate in the lower left corner where it says BDD. The BDD elevation above sea level is 6,532 feet. If we put the tower next to the HOA, the top of the tower will be 6,503 feet. So the top of the tower will actually be lower than that $10 million, 10 million gallon, I should say, water tank at the water treatment plant. So what we're proposing to put up is actually lower than the adjacent building, which is about 450 feet away. And it's lower than the power lines that are behind the building, which are up to 100 feet. And so it's really an ideal location because as you look out to the right, you can see Las Campanas and the golf course. The land slopes up. So people who have homes there, and by the way, the closest home to that tower is about 900 yards. So that's over a half of a mile. So the people who have homes there would be looking down on the tower. So with the hills that are on the other side of the commuter rail trail, the tower would not impinge on their sight lines. They'd be looking down on it, and the tower would have an outline against the hills from those homes. Now, if you get close to the tower, then that's a different story. But in any case, it's really an ideal location because it doesn't impinge on people's sight lines, and it's lower than adjacent structures, and it provides 100% coverage if we can get up to that 70 feet. Amy, could you please go on to, I think it's the second photograph that shows the Las Campanas Owners Association building from the street? There we go. So this is from the street in front of the Owners Association building. And we want to put the tower just slightly to the left of the building. And Amy will have some specific photographs, photo sims of that. But what you can see behind it is a 92-foot power line pole, double pole. And that's one of 3 separate sets of parallel power lines. So what we're proposing to go up is going to be 22 feet lower than that power line that's already there, as well as 29 feet lower than the BDD water tank. So we really don't think that it's a big impact on sight lines compared to what's already there. And just for the fun of it, Amy, if you could go to that other photograph that I sent. Okay, this is a cell tower that's on West Alameda Street in Agua Fria here in Santa Fe County. This tower is 283 feet high, according to the FCC documentation for that specific tower. And I took this photograph myself. If you look, it's surrounded by residential area. So what we're asking for is a quarter of the height of this existing tower. It's right on the other side of 599 from Las Campanas. So one of the planning commissioners said he didn't like tall towers. Well, this is a tall tower. What we're proposing is certainly not a tall tower. Thank you very much, Amy. I'll continue with the rest of this. So as kind of a recap, we met with the technical advisory committee of the county back in April of 2020. We held a pre-application meeting in July of 2020. There were 114 attendees. There were 0 complaints about the tower. We submitted the application to the county on July 27th of last year. 3.5 months later, they set us up for the hearing officer meeting on November 12th. At the hearing officer meeting, there were 10 members of the public that testified. All members testified in favor. Zero members of the public testified against. And most of the people said that there were issues around safety and security, and that's why they want to have the tower. Now, as Mr. Bustos mentioned, the hearing officer ruled in favor of the variance. And I'm just going to read this real briefly. The joint applicant's statement in support of the variance, together with the evidence submitted at the public hearing, demonstrate that the hardship criteria in section 4.9.7.4.2 is met. The applicant's response to the hardship criteria addressing the inadequacy of the current height restriction of 27 feet and to provide reliable and sustainable network. Therefore, evidence submitted at the public hearing demonstrate that the existing cell phone service in the Las Campanas area results in dropped calls and loss of service, risk in health and safety of the area residents and visitors, as well as inefficiencies in daily life. Additionally, uncontroverted evidence submitted at the public hearing establishes that compliance with the existing height limitation of 27 feet will not materially improve service, and the 70-foot height request is necessary to provide adequate service in the vicinity of Las Campanas. And in conclusion, the hearing officer states the variance application meets the requirement of the SLDC applicable to the height variance for the proposed stealth wireless communication facility and should be approved. But then he added, the hearing officer recommends the application be approved subject to the conditions recommended by the county staff. So the hearing officer is attorney Richard Virtue. I'm sure the commissioners know. He clearly stated that the applicant meets the requirements for the 70-foot tower. But then staff took that last statement, subject to the conditions recommended by county staff, and came in and said, oh, well, our condition is that you can only go to 27 feet or 48 feet with transferable development rights. And to pretty much everybody who saw that presentation, we couldn't quite understand that the discrepancy between what the hearing officer plainly said, which should be granted a 70-foot tower height, versus the condition that the staff decided to apply, which was a 27-foot limitation or 48 feet with development rights. So we really think that when staff pulled the zoning table from section 8.19 that states 27 feet and 48 feet with development rights as the maximum height of an edifice in the county, it really is the incorrect section to apply, because there's an applicable part of the SDLC that deals specifically with cell communications. It's section 10.17, wireless communication facilities. And it states directly, section 1017 shall apply to the installation, construction, modification, or operation of any wireless communication facility located within the unincorporated areas of the county. And it lists standards, and it states the overall height of a proposed stealth wireless communication facility shall be limited to that which is allowed within the zoning district in which the facility is located and which is consistent with the surrounding community. And if you look at the table that has the zoning districts 10.3 that gives the height per the zoning district, the height is 60 feet. It's not 27 feet. It's not 48 feet with development rights. It's 60 feet in a planned development. It's the last one on the list. But it does go on to say, however, in no case may the overall height of a stealth facility exceed 50 feet. So there's really no requirement anywhere in 10.17 that deals with a cell tower that says that there has to be TDRs. It does not exist. And we think that the staff misapplied the requirement for TDRs, because the SDLC is very clear that 10.17 applies to cell towers. So we respectfully submit that the 27-foot limitation and the 48-foot TDRs is really not applicable. And rather, the code limits the stealth tower to 50 feet. And our appeal, to be clear, is we want to have a 70-foot tower with no staff requirements of these TDRs because they're not applicable according to 10.17. So going forward, the Planning Commission WebEx was on the 21st of January. Numerous people testified for the 70-foot tower. Nobody testified against it. The commission voted 4-2 to limit the tower to the 48-foot with TDRs. And what they said was, the commissioners are not convinced that extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions of the property exist, such that the strict application of the SLDC would result in peculiar and exceptional practical difficulties or exceptional and undue hardship to the applicant. Well, frankly, I'm here to tell you that this strict application does provide, or does imply and does restrict us unduly. The county's received over 400 letters in support specifically of a 70-foot cell tower, mainly from Las Campanas residents, but also from people who work here, people from also the local neighboring communities. We've received 5 against the tower. So there's overwhelming support for the tower. So, you know, people use their cell phones at home, not just for work. I mean, if you're working at home and your cell phone doesn't work, your livelihood is affected. And that's an undue restriction. And even more importantly, people depend on their cell phones for safety and medical reasons. You know, here in Santa Fe County, the average age is 47 years, but in Las Campanas, the average age is 68 years. So subsequently, people require better communications or more communications with medical providers. And within those 400 letters are many, many letters that addressed medical situations. I mean, here's one from a woman who wrote that her husband suffered a major cardiac event. He had to have open heart surgery and had a pacemaker and defibrillator installed. And then transmitter from this communicates with his medical provider via, guess what, cell phone. And he's also supposed to start to walk around so that he can build back his heart muscle. And without having cell coverage, he can't communicate with his cardiologist. He can't communicate with the hospital. And when he walks around, there's no communication whatsoever. So it's a huge imposition for him to not have this. There's another one from a person who wrote that their daughter visited during a school break, and she took a walk around the neighborhood. This was in February in the cold. And she started to get lost because all the homes looked the same. I think our design review people won't agree to that, but that's another story. And then once the winter sun started going down, she didn't know where she was. She tried to call, she couldn't get a cell phone signal. And of course, with our dark skies out here, she walked around, couldn't even find any houses with lights on. And she tried to call 911. She tried to call her family. The family figured out she'd been gone for several hours. Finally, she went into a home that was open, I mean, that had lights on, and they called her family, and she was 5 miles away from where she started. Why? Because she didn't have a cell phone. All this would have, it worked. All this would have been alleviated if we had cell phone coverage. You know, and here's another one, and this is really interesting. You might know this particular person because she's been involved with the water board for a long time. She basically had this strange situation, and I fully understand it because I've had a long career in telecommunications. But several years ago, I was involved in a situation where a member of Las Campanas collapsed next to me outdoors. This is Jenny Sylvan. Some of you may know her. She's a great person. We called 911 immediately, and the person answering the 911 line did not know where Las Campanas was. Well, guess why? Her cell phone was pinging Los Alamos because it was the best line of sight. So at the Los Alamos 911 center, they had no idea where Las Campanas was, and they had a lot of trouble getting through to somebody to get some medical service for this person. Fortunately, the person was actually okay. And then there's another one. I kind of brought it up last time, but I'm going to mention it again. This is from a gentleman who is an active member of the Santa Fe Search and Rescue Team. And he says that you must have immediate cell phone service to support the search and rescue missions, most of which are life and death situations that require immediate team response. So this is the end of last year. He wrote that so far this year I've had 139 missions personally, and he's missed a number of the emergency response notifications because they try to contact him, and guess what? His cell phone doesn't work because there's no coverage. So you don't even think about things like that, but emergency responders need to have cell phone coverage so they can get out and help people like me who walk the trails and might get themselves into trouble. And by the way, AT&T has the capability of what's called FirstNet. FirstNet was designed by the federal government after the attacks of 9/11. And essentially what they found out in New York City was the Port Authority couldn't communicate with the New York Fire Department. They couldn't communicate with New Jersey State Police. They couldn't communicate with the police department. So they set up a national network for emergency responders, and they have specific wavelengths that they can use for emergency responders, sheriffs, police, EMTs, etc. AT&T has this capability. If we have a cell tower of 70 feet, I'm pretty sure I can get AT&T on that tower, and that will provide that FirstNet, very important FirstNet capability here in this area. It's my understanding it's going into other parts of Santa Fe County, but right now we have absolutely no access to that. So that's a very important issue. So going back to the situation about the applicant and the hardship, this isn't just an applicant. Our applicant is the association of roughly 2,000 people who own lots and homes out here. And they depend on this service, and not only here in Las Campanas, but in neighboring neighborhoods. We also have about 80 new homes under construction or major remodels, which means at any given time during the week, there are between 480 and 800 workers in the construction trades that are in Las Campanas. Many of them are younger. They live throughout the Santa Fe County area. They live in multi-generational homes. So their only communication with their family in this time of COVID is via their cell phone when they're here in Las Campanas for an 8 or 9 hour or 10-hour workday. So without this service, basically their lifeline is cut. They have no way to communicate, and their family has no way to communicate with them. And that's not to mention, communicating with suppliers and other people who need to go to job sites. There are also about 150 or more Las Campanas club members, and a number of them are women who work in the restaurant, and when the restaurant closes, it's dark, and they're driving back to their homes in various parts of the county. And if they don't have cell service, I don't even want to think about the bad things that can happen if their car breaks down. I just don't even want to go there, but you can understand that. The Owners Association has roughly 50 employees who use cell phones when they're traveling throughout the whole development, and without the coverage, they can't do that. And so by limiting this height to 48 feet, again, we're reducing the amount of coverage by 50% or 55%, and we're also eliminating AT&T. So just kind of summarizing this request, as you all know, the SLDC, I think very wisely, gives you, the Board of County Commissioners, the latitude to grant variances based on 3 criteria. One, where the request is not contrary to the public interest. Clearly, the proposed cell tower will provide services both to residents, to neighboring communities, to workers, et cetera, first responders, as I mentioned. So it's in the public interest to grant this waiver or grant this variance request for a 70-foot tower. The second requirement for a variance to be granted is where, due to extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions of the property, the strict application of the code would result in peculiar and exceptional practical difficulties or exceptional and undue hardship on the owner. As I mentioned, these are 2,000 people who own this land, and they depend on their service for convenience, for work, for health, for security, for safety. So the strict application of the code, resulting in a 50% reduction of coverage, would be an undue hardship. I mean, how can we say, okay, you people who happen to live in this area at 48-foot tower, you get service, but you other people, you don't get service because it's going to be 48 feet because that's what the code says. Really the code doesn't say that. It says 50 feet because it's in the section 10.17. But in any case, clearly the requirements are met to grant the variance for number 2. And number three, so that the spirit of the SLDC is observed and substantial justice is done. Well, the code encourages accommodating the growing need for wireless service in section 10.17.2.5. And it also encourages coordination between wireless carriers in 10.17.2.6. So by having a 70-foot tower, one, we're helping to provide the service that the county encourages. Secondly, we're encouraging the cooperation between AT&T and Verizon to be on the same tower. So by limiting the height to the 48 feet, I mean, it just doesn't provide that service. And it would be unjust to people to not get that service because of the limitation of the height. So with that, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Amy, who's going to talk specifically about what the tower is going to look like. And I think it's going to be the nicest looking tower in Santa Fe County, I guarantee you. And she can also talk specifically about some of the things that we're doing with the tower. And then if you don't mind, I'll just come back to me for a moment afterwards to summarize a few things. Amy?
Yeah, I need to get sworn in.
Yes, please. Ms. McKenzie, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give us the truth?
I do.
And could you supply your address, please?
Yes, I'm at 422 Live Oak Court, Northeast, Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Thank you.
Thanks. I won't go into the things that Robert already went into. This is a unique situation for Verizon because we are coming in as a co-applicant. The way that the relationship is going to work, we have a lease with Las Campanas Masters Association to provide service on the tower. What Verizon's plan is to build the tower, and ownership will actually be with Las Campanas. So Las Campanas, as the owner, has the rights to lease space on the tower. So we would, at the end of all of this, we would be a mere tenant on the tower, and Las Campanas can market the second location, assuming it's a tall enough tower, to a second provider. So just so you understand how the relationship works. But we had to enter into this as kind of a co-applicant situation so that we could get the conceptual plan changed to allow wireless towers in the PD, because it, again, as Robert explained, that wasn't part of the provision when the master plan was done back in the 90s. So that's how we got here. And we did understand after looking at, again, all of the possibilities of locating this site, we really did look into the SLDC. We looked into the requirements for Verizon for their customers, and we looked at, what could we provide for the good of the county, not just the good of Verizon's customers, not just the good of Las Campanas, but the good of Santa Fe County. And what we found was that a single stealth site met the needs of the Master Association because they wanted something that looked nice. Not everybody wants a, self-support tower or a monopole or a faux tree in their yard. So we came up with a very nice Santa Fe style design. And while I'm speaking, I will go ahead and grab that for you. Give me 1 second. I'm not as good as sharing at the same time. 1 second. Okay, hopefully you can see that. So this is what in the field is considered a faux bell tower. Again, this is a design that shows a 70-foot section. The top section where you can see a little window, that would be where Verizon's antennas would go. And we're talking about a 70-foot structure, but our antennas would be center line. So they'd be at roughly 65 as a center line, 64 as a center line. And then this middle section right here would be where the second provider would be able to go. Our equipment and any second carrier would be behind this CMU wall, and just so hidden from anybody's view. So this is what they would see. And bear with me again, I'm going to change screens and I'm going to show you a different vantage point. Okay, these are photo simulations, and this is the north elevation. So on the left, without the tower, and I don't know if this camera's in my way, sorry. And on the right is where you would see the proposed 70-foot tower. This is the east elevation looking down at the homeowners association without the tower on the left and with the 70-foot tower on the right. And then the last viewpoint is the southeast elevation looking northwest. Again, here is the homeowners association, and this is what the view would be with the 70-foot structure. So I'm going to stop sharing real quick. Okay, so again, we looked at the different height elevations. We looked at the 27, we looked at the 48, we looked at the 70. 27 didn't work at all. The only coverage that it would provide would essentially be right around the homeowners association. And anything that you went from 70 feet is the optimal and the minimum that would provide the maximum coverage and capacity. So, and again, I say 70 feet, but again, our center line is really like 64. So you have to figure it's the center line of the antennas. So the antennas are not at 70 feet, they're actually at about 64. So when you say 48, we're really like at 43. And 27, we would be at like 22. So that's just the tip of the structure is when we're talking about 70 or 48 or 27. So again, anytime, as Robert explained earlier, that every time we decrease the height, we decrease the coverage and the capacity because the tower has to be able to see to the other side. And as you all know, in that particular area of Santa Fe County, very hilly, lots of dips, and the line of sight is not clean. There's a lot of clutter with the topography that dictates the need for a taller structure for communications. We appreciate the fact that everything out there is really nice and low. So again, the mitigating that we did for that was to keep it with the Santa Fe style structure so that it really flowed with the design of the homeowners association. It matched the colors. It really blended in very nicely. And then just trying to think, oh, and again, with also doing it at 70 feet, it does allow for a second carrier to come on, which would then reduce the need for tower proliferation in Santa Fe County. Because again, I'm only representing Verizon Wireless. I have no interest, no offense, in what AT&T or T-Mobile does. They can go fight their own fight. But, as a decent person, as a decent citizen, I do want to make sure that I'm doing right by siting in Santa Fe County. And again, fewer towers with more opportunities seems like the best thing to put forward, as opposed to saying, yeah, well, good luck AT&T getting your own tower. We are trying to be good community citizens in Santa Fe County, and if that means sharing the tower, then great. We prefer co-location when we can as well, because it's just the right thing to do for siting. And again, we appreciate the fact that the Plan Commission did approve 48 with TDRs. I have nothing to do with TDRs as a carrier, so that burden would be on Las Campanas, which Robert already addressed. The burden that we face is that 48 feet does not provide adequate coverage to the customers and the users in that particular section of Santa Fe County. And, you know, it's kind of like opening, you know, saying, hey, we're opening a grocery store. You know, you don't have a grocery store. We're so excited you're going to have a grocery store. We build the grocery store and then we only fill it up halfway. You know, it's like, what the heck, you know? I got really excited, and you're not carrying all the food that you know that we assumed you would. So it's a very expensive venture, building infrastructure and building towers and providing service. Verizon takes great pride in providing quality, and that's to be expected. I mean, we all expect that when we purchase some kind of service, whether it's, you know, Comcast or Verizon or whatever. You want good service, and so to spend that kind of money and then only get 50%, 60% service or coverage or capacity is really disheartening, and I think it would very much upset folks in Santa Fe County. And I know my client is not real excited about that. And I appreciate the fact that the staff has said, you know, you can build more than one tower. Well, yes, potentially, but it's not always, you know, at the, how do I put it? I don't know when that next tower would come. You know, I mean, there's budget, there's priorities, there's funding, there's, you know, it's money and it's a business. And I couldn't say to Santa Fe County or to Las Campanas, yeah, great, you know, we'll build this one and in a year from now, we'll work on number two. I don't know when number two would ever, you know, be viable or if it would ever even come. And as you know, as Robert was saying earlier, he's been trying to get wireless service in this part of the county for what, 10 years? But that's about right. So I can appreciate the fact that this is a difficult decision. There's a lot of weight to, you know, the pros and cons of this. But I just ask you to think about the good points to this. It's one structure that can get two carriers on it. It takes care of the majority of the customers in that part of Santa Fe County, not only just Las Campanas, but other folks that are using that, including our emergency responders. It minimizes the need for tower proliferation, so additional towers. It's a nice looking design, and the only folks that are really going to see that tower are the folks driving up and down Las Campanas Drive. The average homeowner is not going to see the tower at all. So I appreciate the time and the attention that the staff and that the commissioners and the, have afforded us. And we just really would like this opportunity for the commissioners to look at the weight of this and the benefits of this, because right now you have nothing, or sorry, maybe not nothing, but very, very poor service. And this is an opportunity to remedy that very quickly and in a large scale at a small cost. And the cost being that additional height. So that's all I have, and I appreciate your attention and your time, and I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. McKenzie. And, you know, we, all of the commissioners here and pretty much most of the audience has been here at least, you know, for the last 8 hours. So, Mr. Kelly, if we could try and wrap it up and because we still have public comment that's going to take another 30 or 40 minutes probably. So if we could wrap it up, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. All I want to say is that we just sincerely hope that we will convey to you the community support for this endeavor. And as Amy mentioned, there is a small cost, but really the risk to you as commissioners is non-existent, because it's the right thing to do. It has the support of the community. It's going to take care of a lot of problems out there, and we just hope that that you've will see it the way that we've been trying to portray it, and go ahead and vote for this variance. So I'll just leave it at that. I don't know how you folks can stay on here since 2 o'clock this afternoon. So I commend you for your fortitude. But thank you very, very much. And I'll just stop talking there. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just really quick, if I may, this is.
Commissioner Garcia, I wanted to go to, we have to go to public comment before we go to commissioners.
No, I appreciate you bringing it forward, and the gentleman just spoke very well said, and you're the chairman, and you're running this meeting. I just, the next individuals that talk, can we not repeat what the gentleman has said?
Point of order, please. I think the chair just requested we go to public comment first, and he's running the meeting.
That's fine. Well, I'll stay there for the next 3 more hours. If you want to sit there for the next 3 more hours, I'm fine with that. But thank you, very well said, sir. And you're the chairman, Mr. Chair, so I will follow your lead. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. So what I was going to say is, just so that we could be cognizant of everybody's time tonight, I'm going to go ahead and allot 2 minutes per individual that would like to speak, but I am going to ask that we not be repetitive, because we don't want to hear the same thing over and over. I mean, we'll understand your point, and if somebody's already brought that point forward, what I'd like for an individual that wants to speak in opposition or in support is just to say, I agree with the statements that are made, and I'm supporting this. And if you have additional information that you feel is relative that you would like to share with the board, then go ahead and share that. But if we could just be cognizant of that, because it is getting late. So I'm going to go ahead and set it at 2 minutes. And Tessa Joe, do you have, how many people do you have to speak tonight?
We have 12 at this point.
Okay, so we've got 12. Is there anybody? Can we read off all those names, and if there's anybody that's not mentioned, if you would like to unmute and state your name for the record, and if you're a call-in, it's *6. So if you could just read off all the names that we have that will speak tonight.
Absolutely. We have Al Antones, Chip Monday, John Flynn, Knight Seavey, Stan Weiner, Howie Alpern, Brian Weiss, Will Prohl, Joe Brooks, Jan Watson, Duffy Kitchelow, Bonnie Brock.
Okay, if your name was not mentioned, please unmute yourself. And if you're a call-in, hit *6 and just state your name for the record.
I don't know if I'm unmuted.
I'm Steve Davis. I would like to speak.
I'm Rachel Rippey, and I would like to talk as well.
I'm Tim Carlson. I'd like to speak also.
Okay, the first gentleman, what was your last name? Steve?
Davis.
Okay, and Rachel?
Rippey.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to sign up to speak?
Okay, so that's the amount of speakers that we'll have tonight. Is that come to 15, Tessa? Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, if we could have our first speaker, and I just want to remind everybody that This is public comment, and you need to be sworn in and provide your address. And so if we could have our first speaker, Tessa.
Our first speaker is Al Antonez.
Good evening.
Mr. Antones, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give is the truth?
I do.
And could you also provide your address, sir?
Sure. Our address is 8 Avenida Herrera, Santa Fe, 87506.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to consider this matter. My name is Al Antonez, and I'm also the general manager of the club at Las Campanas. I previously forwarded information and photos to Vicky Lucero and Gabriel Bustos to highlight the proposed cell tower's location. In the event staff members have not yet had the opportunity to visit the proposed site, and I hope the staff was able to share that information with you at the appropriate time. The proposed 70-foot cell tower is a critically needed infrastructure to facilitate communications, education, and commerce. We are unable to communicate with our staff and their families, and in the case of emergency, we lose precious time trying to get to a landline to call for help. No one could have predicted the future reliance on cell service when the Las Campanas community began. Since that time, a large number of cell towers, many over 200 feet, have been erected in Santa Fe County to serve our citizens. Unfortunately, due to the topography between those towers and the club's location, cell coverage is extremely limited to non-existent where we live and work. Also, within clear sight of the proposed cell tower location, 34 PNM transmission poles, some 79 feet tall and others 106 feet tall, dot the landscape. Our staff is also unable to access technology that would permit irrigation cycles to be shortened and thereby further reducing water consumption, which is a key component of our sustainability program. The club has the only Audubon certified sanctuary golf courses in New Mexico. And as we continue to work with the United States Golf Association and New Mexico State University on research, having access to reliable cell service will further our conservation efforts. The lack of cell service is primarily a life safety issue. The ability of the county's emergency services to be reached and to reach out to our citizens. This project is located on private property, requires no funding from the county, and will improve and save lives. New Mexico's governor, our president are pushing hard to modernize our state and national infrastructure. Senator Martin Heinrich and Senator Ben Ray Lujan has set a goal of 100% connectivity for New Mexico. Santa Fe County, while adopting and supporting other infrastructure needs to help our community. I strongly urge you to grant approval of the 70-foot tower. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Antonez.
Mr. Chairman, excuse me. I promoted you. Our next speaker is Chip Monday.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, and the staff.
Mr. Monday, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give us the truth?
Yes, I've sworn already, and I'll do again.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot.
That's okay, Tess. It was not that long ago, I don't think, in terms of the length of this meeting. I will tell you, though, that I'm looking at this. I won't repeat what others or I have already eloquently said, but one of the things in my experience, and as I am the general manager of the Las Campanas Master Association, but I have served in this capacity in other communities around the country. And one of the things I know in times of disaster, whether it be, in my experience, hurricanes or in wildland fires, one of the things that is always available is self-service, because cell towers typically, when other utilities are cut, they have their own power generation, which keeps them active. If we had a fire, God forbid, one of the things that happens, we learned in California and other places, is that they cut the power so transformers don't blow up when they get approached by fire. This is not just a convenience or a minor safety issue. This is a major safety issue, not just for Las Campanas, but for the entirety of this part of Santa Fe County. What we can't have is putting lives at risk by not providing what is essentially come to be an expected form of communication throughout the country. Las Campanas has somewhat of a stereotype applied to it, But I want to tell you one thing that Las Campanas does need to be applauded for is providing land where the county can't provide it. To allow for something like this, which can provide for the safety of its citizens. And Las Campanas is doing that in providing this location for this cell tower. I strongly encourage, as a resident of the Roybal subdivision at 23 Avenida de Mercedes, just south of Las Campanas on Cajal del Rio, that this is important not just to Las Campanas, but to all of us that live around this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Monday. Appreciate your statements. Can we go to our next speaker, Tessa?
John Flynn.
Thank you. My name is John Flynn. I live at 4 West Arrowhead Circle in Santa Fe County, and I swear that the testimony I'm about to give is the truth. I currently serve as the Vice President of the Homeowners Association. I previously served as the President for a short period of time, and I'm the Chairman of the Chairman of the Community Affairs Committee here in Las Campanas, and I can assure you that in those capacities, I have talked to many, many residents of Las Campanas, and to a person, they all enthusiastically support the request that we're making here tonight for all the reasons that were so eloquently set forth by Mr. Kiley. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Can we get our next, we appreciate your comments. Can we get our next speaker, Tessa?
Knight Seavey.
Yes, my name is Knight Seavey.
Mr. Seavey, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give us the truth?
Yes, I do.
And
My
your
address
address?
is
Yes,
6
thank you.
Camino Medianoche, Santa Fe 87506. I've been working with the Design Review Committee now for several years. I represent the developer, Sienda Partners, in a number of activities within the confines of Las Campanas, and I've been a licensed architect in the state of New Mexico for 39 years. The issues touched upon, I will not revisit. They've been echoed loud and clear. I do see this as a variance test at the end of the day, and the 3 points that Robert illuminated have clearly been met. I can tell you that the developer is fully behind this effort, and truly it is a rare day when the community interests, the HOA interests, and the developer's interests are pointing all in the same direction. This is clearly one of those events. As an architect, my paramount concern is always life, safety, health, and welfare. I cannot think of a case in my career where there has been an argument as compelling to support that thought. I will leave it there. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your comments, sir. Tessa, can we have our next speaker?
Stan Weiner.
Hello.
Hello, Mr. Weiner, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give us the truth?
I do.
Thank you, sir.
And I reside at 40 Paseo Las Terrazas in Las Campanas. I am and thank you for the time. I'm a retired partner at a major law firm, and I spent most of my career defending litigation or trying to prevent it. And it's from that perspective, which is different than what you've heard, that I'm speaking with you. I am gravely concerned as a taxpayer that the county could be exposed to potential litigation if, God forbid, the commissioners decided not to grant this variance, and people having that opportunity to have the safety of the cell service as outlined, that it did not happen. People who come into Las Campanas, workers, contractors, vendors, plus residents who have health and safety concerns, medical emergencies. If, God forbid, something happened and they couldn't get medical service on a timely basis, I am concerned that this county could be the subject of litigation, particularly with the recent House Bill 4 and the expansion of liability, the granting of additional remedies, including mandatory attorney's fees. And so from that perspective, trying to minimize the cost to the county and as a taxpayer is what I am asking the commissioners to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weiner. We appreciate it. Can we have our next speaker?
Howie Alpern.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I'm Howard Alpern. I swear to tell the truth. I live at 30 Calle Me Gusto, Santa Fe, New Mexico. I've read the staff response to the application for variance which was submitted today. It's wrong on the facts, it's wrong on the law. Your staff states, although a wireless communication facility would be beneficial to residents and businesses located in and around Las Campanas PDD, as well as first responders, the proposed tower at 70 feet does not meet the requirements of the SLDC. Well, we know that. That's why we're requesting a variance. What's a variance? A variance is the fact or quality of being different, divergent, or inconsistent. In other words, different from the 27 feet. Black's Law Dictionary defines variance as an official dispensation from a rule or regulation. In other words, your staff is saying don't grant a variance because the code says the tower needs to be smaller. Well, that's why we're asking for a variance, and we meet all the requirements for a variance. Your staff says while the co-location of wireless communications equipment is encouraged in the SLDC, the 27-foot height limit is a requirement. Well, guys, it's a requirement. Well, first of all, it probably isn't, but if it is, it's a requirement unless a variance is granted, and that's what we're asking you to grant. Is a variance. You know, when you put something as complex as the code together, you're going to miss things. Some things won't be the best things for the people. You need to vote for what's best for the people, and that would be by granting this variance. I've got 4 seconds left. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alpern. Appreciate it. Can we have our next speaker, please?
Brian Weiss. If Mr. Weiss is calling in via phone, you'll have to select *6 to unmute. One more time, Brian Weiss. Okay, Will Prohl. No. Will Prohl. How about Joe Brooks? Joe Brooks.
Joe Brooks is there, but muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Brooks, may I swear you in, sir? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give is the truth?
Yes.
Great.
The 9/11 program provides, the federal 9/11 program provides
Thank you.
a grant for funding supports state and local efforts to deliver optimal 9/11 services. The Santa Fe Regional Emergency Communication Center adopts and accepts funding for this. We demand that the tower that we have suggested at 70 feet comply and be accepted for this variance.
Is that it, Mr. Brooks? Did you have an additional comment, sir?
No.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your comments. Tessa, can we have our next speaker?
Jan Watson. Jan Watson.
Yes, I was trying to unmute. This is Jan Watson. I swear that I will be telling the truth. My address is 7 West Avenida Sebastian. Did you hear me? Yes, okay.
Yes.
Good evening,
Yes.
Commissioners and staff. I appreciate this opportunity to speak to you,
I
especially.
believe you were sworn in.
I did.
Okay, I'm sorry. Please proceed.
Do we want to start over on the swearing in?
No.
Okay.
Yes, we've restarted the time for you, ma'am. Please proceed.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners and staff. I appreciate this opportunity to speak to you directly, especially knowing that this has already been a very long day for you. Several weeks ago, my mother, who is in assisted living under hospice care, fell and injured herself. When her caregiver found her on the floor and moaning in pain, they immediately reached out to me via text and phone call. They tried repeatedly over the next 4 hours, but couldn't reach me because the text messages didn't go through and the calls kept getting dropped before they got connected. It wasn't until I left home and started driving into town that all of the text messages and calls started pinging my phone. Yes, 4 hours later, and only because I drove a mere 3 miles closer to Santa Fe proper. Of course, by then my mother had already been admitted to the ER and taken by ambulance, and luckily it was nothing life-threatening. But what if it had been? You can't imagine how terrifying it is to have a health emergency out here and not be able to get a cell signal to call for help. What I can tell you is that on a really good day, I'm lucky to have 1 bar of reception for roughly 3/4 of the day, but no reception at all for the rest of the day. On a bad day, or actually more like a typical day, it's just the reverse and I have no coverage at all. So it's not just me, it's all of the service providers that come into the community. They're just as hamstrung as I am. It's not just the residents, it's UPS, it's FedEx, the Postal Service, delivery drivers, construction workers, emergency responders, search and rescue teams, landscapers, and on and on and on. We all suffer from the same lack of self-service. Please help us by approving this.
Thank you, Ms. Watson. Thank you for your comments. Tessa Jo, can we have our next speaker?
Duffy Kitchelow.
Yes, thank you. Duffy Kinchlow, 5531 Labello, Dallas, Texas. I have a home in Las Campanas.
Mr. Kitchener, may I
Yes.
swear you in, please?
Please.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give us the truth?
I do.
Thank you, sir.
Very similar to the last caller, I experienced what could have been a very serious emergency situation with a family member on a walk this past September. My sister-in-law fell. She could not get up. I could not use my cell service, and I had to run back to my house to get a get a landline. Now, unfortunately, since I have 2 bad knees, that ended up being a very fast walk. The story ended up being good. She spent 5 days in Santa Fe Hospital, 2 weeks in rehabilitation, but she was okay. But I knew then and there that we had a very, very serious problem with cell coverage. So I support this initiative and agree wholeheartedly that it's in the best interest of not only the general daily lives of the community, but also for the health and safety. And I will stop there.
Thank you, Mr. Kinchelo. We appreciate your comments, sir. Tessa, can we have our next speaker?
Bonnie Brock.
Bonnie Brock.
Bonnie Brock.
Yes, go ahead, ma'am. Ma'am, if you could be sworn in and provide your address.
18 Tecolote Circle, Santa Fe.
Ms. Brock,
I
Ms. Brock,
yield my time to anyone who would like to speak. My subjects have already been covered. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brock. Can we get our next speaker, please?
Steve Davis. Steve Davis.
Good evening, Steve Davis. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir, we can.
Yes.
Yes. My name is Steve Davis. I'm a 16-year resident of 17 Thundercloud Road, and I have not been sworn in.
Mr. Davis, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give us the truth?
I do.
Thank you, sir.
I would echo what Ms. Watson said in so many different ways. I would add one personal note that we had an incident here at our household where I took a fall, broke 7 ribs and a neck, and without cell service available, my wife had to go outside to look for a connection. Was cut off a couple of times, but finally managed to get through. And the story has a happy ending, but I think it illustrates that the importance of cell service for protecting the basic health of the residents of Las Campanas and the surrounding areas that will be affected by this new cell tower, should it be approved, is fundamental. It is very important. And I think at the end of the day, the first job of government, is it not, to provide safety for its citizens? So I would just add to what Ms. Watson and others have said this evening, and strongly encourage the commissioner and staff to look at the facts, which were gathered well and presented well, and speak for themselves, and approve this variance for the 70-foot tower. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Davis, for your comments. Tessa, can we have our next speaker?
Rachel Rippey.
Hello, I think I'm off of mute.
Miss
Yes, we can
Rippey?
hear you. Go ahead.
Miss Rippey, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give us the truth?
I do. I am
Thank
actually
you.
calling 940 East Old Elm in Lake Forest, Illinois, but where it's an hour later than where you are, and I have a home at 1 Camino de Colores in Las Campanas. My perspective is mildly unique. I would see the tower. I would love to see the tower every day. I think it's a wonderful idea. I think it's a beautiful design, and I don't think that there is any reason why we shouldn't have such a useful, beautiful building on our property. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Ripley. We appreciate your comments. Can we get our next speaker?
Tim Carlson.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and honorable commissioners. My name is Tim Carlson. I swear the testimony I give will be truthful. I live at 8 Madrona Circle, Santa Fe County. I agree and support this variance and ask that you please approve case number 20-5071. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. We appreciate that. Tessa, unless I'm wrong, is that our last speaker?
Yes, it is. Is there anybody else who would wish to give testimony on this item? That concludes our public testimony, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. And I'm going to go to Commissioner Hansen, who is the commissioner in this district.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to make a motion to overturn the Planning Commission's decision and remove the TDRs and approve case 20-5071. And I place no conditions on this motion.
And I second it.
You got it.
Okay, we have multiple seconds, and so we have seconds from Commissioner Hughes and Commissioner Hamilton, and I'll second it as well. So I'm going to go to a roll call vote. Commissioner Garcia?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I totally understand the whole broadband and the emergency and the cell service, and I understand. I appreciate everybody that has spoken tonight, and I just have a hard time with this because it's, why not go 100 foot? Why 70? Why not 50? And so that's the question that I have, that I dealt with many, many years ago with the carriers for cell service. And so, don't get me wrong, I understand the whole emergency stuff. And speaking with some of my constituents in my area, it's a little bit hard for me to vote for it, so I vote no.
Really?
Okay. Commissioner Hamilton?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, I thought he said Hamilton. Sorry.
Commissioner Hamilton?
Now,
Yes.
okay, I want to say a few words. I really feel that this is incredibly important for my constituents and for the constituents in that entire area. And it is for the health and public safety that this is being done, and we absolutely need this. So thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for being here. I am grateful to all of your taking all of the time. And congratulations, Robert, on being president. I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Hanson. Commissioner Hamilton?
Yes.
Commissioner Hughes?
Yes.
And a yes from Commissioner Roybal. So this item passes 4-1.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt, and I'm sorry to add to the length of the meeting. But before we adjourn for this evening, on the agenda as item number 9C2 was consideration and potential action on affordable housing agreement for the St. Francis South preliminary plat. And I don't believe that we technically addressed that item after we concluded the public hearing. And so I just respectfully request that we go back to that item. I don't know if the board desires any input from staff on it, but it would just be consideration of the affordable housing agreement, which again does not require a public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. So for item D 20-5071 Las Campanas Master Association appeal, this item is passed, and so thank you and congratulations. So we're going to go back to item number C, and I'm going to go to the motioner and the second, and if the stenographer can refresh my memory, I believe that it was Commissioner Hamilton.
I believe I made that motion.
Yes.
I'm not clear. Greg, could you, I don't know what words I missed, but I'm not clear what the issue is.
Sure, and if the maker and the seconder all intended to include that, that's fine. But it's not with the request for approval of preliminary plat and final plat. Instead, there is a separate item, which is the consideration and potential action on the affordable housing agreement if the preliminary and final plat approval is granted after public hearing. And so if you intended your motion to encompass the affordable housing agreement as well, that's fine as long as we clarify that for the record. But I didn't recall hearing that in your motion or in the second. So that's the issue. It's the affordable housing agreement as opposed to the preliminary and final plat.
Mr. Chair, it was Commissioner Hamilton who made the motion, and sir, you made the second.
I'm just trying to refresh my memory about what the issue with the affordable housing.
Mr. Chair, maybe Vicky, you could explain the affordable housing agreement.
Mr. Chair, also on that note, I know it's late and we've been here for a while today, and appreciate my colleagues and staff too. One of the questions I have, so is the consultant still around in regards to whether they agree to this affordable housing agreement or not? Do we need to have him be here, Greg, or not? So that's just the question I have.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Roy Ball, the applicant has signed the agreement, so I don't think there's any doubt about their acceptance of it. So in the version of the agreement that's in your packet, it has been signed by the applicant. So they are in agreement with the affordable housing agreement, and staff recommends it as well. So I don't think it's an issue so much as we just need to clarify the record to make sure that the board approved it so that it can be executed by the chair.
So yes, please note the clarification that that was intended to be included in my motion.
Okay, and that is also part of my second. So with that being said, Greg, we'd still need to do a roll call vote, correct?
So, I just, excuse me. As I looked over this, I remember seeing that there is one thing that has a problem, is it says that Anna T. Hamilton is the chair of the Board of County Commissioners. So that is going to have to be changed in this affordable housing agreement, and I meant to bring that up. I'm sorry.
Was that copied from when we did this, or what? Gosh, well, good catch. I never even noticed that.
It may well be, and we can change that in the execution copy, but that is a good catch.
Okay, so we have a motion from Commissioner Hamilton and a second from Commissioner Roybal. I'm going to go to a roll call vote. Commissioner Garcia?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Hanson?
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton?
Yes.
Commissioner Hughes?
Yes.
And a yes from Commissioner Roybal, so this item passes unanimously. With the not change, but the item that we left off in our previous vote. So is that need to Attorney Schaefer?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, commissioners, for your indulgence of that cleanup. Thank you.
Thank you. And so we're on to item number 10, concluding business. Are there any announcements from commissioners or anybody else? Okay, well, I'll entertain a motion.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I understand the whole complexity of the previous case regarding the cell tower, and I get it. I understand. I know how broadband works and what the administration is doing. That's a hard decision for me, and I respect my colleagues and everybody that spoke and dialed in and called in, and so I just want to put that for the record as into that was a hard decision for me and a hard choice for me. So just wanted to bring that forward, and I respect my colleagues and everybody that spoke. So I just wanted to put that on the record. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with that motion for adjournment.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia, and thank you for the motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
We have a second from Commissioner Hughes. All those in favor signify by saying bye. Good night.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye. Good night.
Appreciate it.
Good night, everybody.